30 years, the forces of autocracy
The Russian army is committing barbaric actions.
My name is Alexander Stubb. I'm the director of the School of Transnational Governance at the European University Institute in Florence. I'm also the former Prime Minister, Finance Minister and Foreign Minister of Finland. But probably for all intents and purposes, I'm an avid student of international relations and world politics. And that's what we will be talking about today, 4 weeks into the war in Ukraine. And I'll do that by giving an introduction, 3 points and a conclusion. Now, by way of introduction, I think one of the big problems that we have in the West is that the ongoing conflict and war has been framed as an issue where you have two parties, Russia versus the West. And I think we in the West, whatever it means, need to understand that this is about much, much more than that. This is about the global political order, and that is how it should be framed. This conflict will have global ramifications, much like World War I did, much like World War II did, or much like the end of the Cold War did. And the question for us is, have we been able to learn the lessons on how to construct a new global order in a post-war situation or not? I think it's probably too early to say where we're going to go with all of this, but at least we can make a stab or an attempt to try to understand and make sense of what is going on. And I'll do that with 3 points. Number 1, comparisons from history. Number 2, reflections about the nature of power. And number 3, looking at different global orders as they have emerged in post-war eras. And of course, then I'll make a little bit of a conclusion. So number 1, what are the comparisons? I'm not a historian, I'm a humble PhD in international relations, and of course I look at things fairly short term. So therefore I would draw 3 key dates that at least have some kind of mirror images of what is going on at the moment. And at the moment means when the tectonic plates of world politics are shifting and powers are shifting. The first one is, of course, the beginning of World War I, 1914, and subsequently its end in 1918. The second one is World War II, so 1939, and peace agreements and institutions emerging in the post-1945 era. And then, of course, the third one is the Cold War ending in 1989 and the Soviet Union collapsing in 1991. I think what we're witnessing and seeing on the borders of Europe will potentially have similar type of ramifications on the global order. Or at least I hope that if not we in the West, at least the rest of the world understands the ramifications. And anytime there is tremendous disruption into a system as we're seeing at the moment, there's always an opportunity to change the system. And therefore we go to my second point, the nature of power. Now, I think in today's world, everything has become geopolitical. And by that I mean to say that geopolitics used to be seen as tanks, soldiers, military power, missiles, armies, navies, air forces. But of course, in today's world, it's much more than that. So we talk about geoeconomics, for instance, as an instrument of power. Mark Leonard, in his new book, talks about the age of unpeace. And I would agree that we've entered something like that. Even before the conventional warfare started in Ukraine with Russian aggression and the Russian attack, it was very difficult to distinguish the line between war and peace. It was blurred. And the reason for that was very simple, and that was that everything has become weaponized. So everything can be used as a weapon. Classic examples, of course, technology or algorithms or data, artificial intelligence can be used as a weapon. Energy can be used as a weapon. Information certainly has been and is being used as a weapon. The economy in the form of trade or sanctions can be used as a weapon. Climate can be used as a weapon. And of course, this in addition to military and conventional warfare being used as a weapon. So the basic argument here is, and to add on one more, human beings and refugees, human shields being used as a weapon. So we've entered an era where we didn't think that conventional warfare was the way to go about it because the alternative cost of that was so high, as we are of course seeing in Ukraine at this particular moment. So I think the whole nature of power and what it means and what it entails is changing around the world. And we will see this change sort of moving along. My third and final point is a discussion on a new global order. Now, I come back to the notion of us trying to over-rationalize the past and make sense of what the world used to be like. And here I stress that a period like the Cold War, for instance, it was kind of neat and comfortable. Why? Because the world was bipolar. The Soviet Union, which was autocratic, dictatorial in many ways, and also believed in a planned economy, was on one hand. And on the other hand, you had the United States with all of its allies who believed in democracy, freedom, and capitalism. This was a neat world. It was quite binary, black and white almost. And in order to support that bilateral world, you had a multilateral system in the form of the United Nations and its Security Council. Then you had the Warsaw Pact on the Soviet side and NATO on the Western side. You had economic integrations through the then European economic communities. You had global trade being overseen by a global system of trade in the form of GATT. You had Bretton Woods, which created institutions such as the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank. But the bottom line is that these multilateral institutions were created in a post-war era to mirror and give the image of those powers, big powers, that won World War II. So in that sense, they're not reflective of today's world. Second observation on the new global order is to say that the post-Cold War era wasn't that much different. In other words, it didn't disrupt or fundamentally change the institutions that we had. The world was unipolar, driven by the United States, and it still relied on the multilateral institutions that we created way back then after World War II. Now, the question is, will we use this moment and this momentum to change this? Now, my argument is that Russia will be fully isolated from at least the West, but most probably also quite far to the rest of the world. Russia will be a player in one way or another, but the bottom line here is that we need to look elsewhere. We need to understand, and I come back to this point, this is not about Russia versus the West. This is about the West understanding the rest. And by that I mean to say that I think we might be moving towards a world where we don't have deglobalization, as a lot of people believe, because of the value chains that exist, but we will have the regionalization of globalization, which can be described as great fragmentation or whatever you want to use as a term, but it will be a combination whereby, yes, we believe in globalization, but that globalization will be a little bit more local, European, American, Asian, African, etc., etc. I don't know what the new global order is going to look like, but if we don't understand that a lot of countries, India, Brazil, many African countries, if they don't feel justifiably represented in the international institutions, they are not going to stick to those institutions. They will want to create separate institutions, intergovernmental institutions. And that, of course, will mean a system to the new global order. Before the war started, I believed that we were moving towards a tripolar world. The United States, China, and the European Union. Of course, the United States and the European Union going hip to hip and hand in hand, but nevertheless with slightly different systems. Now I'm not so sure anymore. I think the world could become a little bit more bipolar, but we simply don't know. So I conclude by saying that I think it is too early to say what kind of a world will emerge from this. But at the same time, I am convinced that something new will come out of this. And I hope that a lot of academics, think tankers, pundits, politicians, experts, journalists start thinking about the world after the war. Because that day will come, not only in terms of reconstruction of Ukraine, but also in terms of thinking about the European and the global security structure. And I'm wondering whether perhaps it's time for some kind of a new global institution and reflection about the future and what it will look like. This is what I wanted to say about the world with 3 points. Number 1, a comparison of dates. Number 2, a reflection on the nature of power. And number 3, what a new global order means. I really don't know, but I'm working damn hard to try to understand and hope you are too.
Over the last 30 years, the forces of autocracy
The Russian army is committing barbaric actions.